Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatley Toes Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video. Hope you're all doing well. Now, seeing as no one at MPL seems to want to talk about the album Back to the Egg or an archive edition release thereof, I thought I would, not about the archive edition, but I thought I would do a deep dive of the album itself. And I'll just ask the question, is Back to the Egg actually any good? Because, you know, when Back to the Egg came out in 1979, universally panned by critics, not a lot of love from fans, and you know, it ended up being the sort of the final Wings album. There seemed to be nowhere to go after this album, but in recent years, Back to the Egg has gained kudos. It has been, it has become more popular. I see it in the comments on my videos. People talk about loving Back to the Egg. It's their favourite album. Fans are very much more favourable towards Back to the Egg now than they were back then. And there's a similar thing going on with Back to the Egg as there is with Ram. I mean, Ram was an album that was universally panned by critics when it came out, and again, not much loved by fans, but now it has grown in stature. And you can see YouTubers and fans, every Tom, Dick and Skylar are now ranking Ram as their number one Paul McCartney solo album. Now, I'm not suggesting for a single second that Back to the Egg is anywhere near that level yet, but there has been, an upsurging of love for Back to the Egg. And I kind of put this down to fans getting older, because, we're not the pop snobs that we were when we were teenagers when this came out. As you get older, your taste mellow and you're sort of, banjo solo. Quite nice. Not that there are any banjo solos on Back to the Egg, but you know what I'm talking about. So Back to the Egg has gained in stature. So we're going to do a deep dive, look into every track. But I think that you need to put the album into context, where we were with the music business in 1979. Now, in 1978, the charts here in the UK, and I think it's fairly similar in America as well, were dominated by songs released from the soundtracks of Saturday Night Fever and Grease. ABBA were as big as they've ever been. We'd been through the punk thing, and we'd got used to the charts also being dominated by punk's more accessible little brother, New Wave, which was basically punk but with better tunes. But moving into 79, that was still the case, with some great bands coming out of the New Wave era, The Jam, Elvis Costello, The Police, loads, too many to mention. But also disco. Disco was very, very dominant in the UK and in America as well, swamping the charts with hits. So, the music industry or music, the charts were, a little bit all over the place. And we were kind of in a little bit of flux as well, because the bands that had sort of dominated in the 70s, in the early, the mid part of the 70s, the Pink Floyds, the Led Zeppelins, those sort of bands, Genesis, were past their sell-by date. They were no longer really producing the goods. And we were kind of in that sort of flux period where we were moving between sort of classic rock, sort of moving sort of further down the scale, and the kind of introduction of the stuff that would dominate the early 80s synth rock or pop. Guitars were kind of being faded out, if you like, and replaced by synthesizers. And so the music business was a little bit all over the place, and that is perfectly reflected in this album, Back to the Egg, which is an album that is a little bit all over the place. So if you kind of look at what we've got on this album, we've got pop songs, We've got rock songs, we've got new wave songs, we've got a synth pop song, we've got ballads, and we've got a bit of jazz. So definitely a little bit all over the place. Not that that's particularly unusual for an album mostly written by Paul McCartney, because, you know, his albums of, you know, original material were never really of any fixed genre anyway. You know, he didn't stand still for too long. He would mix and match it a little bit. So that's not that unusual. So I think that's where we were in the context of 1979 with music. So Wings themselves were also in a state of flux in 1978. They'd once again been reduced down to 3 members, Paul, Linda and Denny. They needed a new lead guitarist. They needed a new drummer because Denny Laine was very keen to get the band out on the road again, and he kind of took it upon himself to kind of force that agenda and recruit new members for the band. He knew Steve Holley. Steve Holley, the drummer, had drummed on Elton John's album A Single Man, and he'd met Lawrence Juba, I think, when he was on the David Essex Show, which was a BBC show, and I think Lawrence Juba was in the sort of the house band sort of thing, and he introduced them to Wings, and Paul liked what he saw, and they were recruited. As far as I know, they never auditioned any other drummers or lead guitarists. As far as I know, really, the two of them pretty much walked into the gig with Wings, thanks to Denny. And you know, I think there's always been a little bit of a question about whether they were the right fit for the band. Now, not from a musical point of view. From a new musical point of view, that has never been in question. Both very, very talented, superb musicians, and but I think that there's a difference between previous members that have been recruited to Wings: Denny Seiwell, Henry McCulloch, Jimmy McCulloch, and Joe English. And I don't think that Lawrence and Steve had that same sort of rock presence or rock persona that, say, Jimmy McCulloch and Joe English brought to the band. You can tell me what you think about that down in the comments. I mean, you know, as I say, this is not detracting about what they did musically. You know, to be fair to them, you know, Denny Seiwell and, you know, Henry McCulloch had 2 albums to sort of establish themselves. Jimmy McCulloch and Joe English had 3, if you count the parts on London Town that they played on before they left. And, you know, Steve and Lawrence really only had this 1 album, really. And so one other thing to mention is that Lawrence Juba has got a fantastic memory, and he has been an invaluable resource in us finding out about the Back to the Egg sessions, down to the fact that he remembers what guitar and what amp he played on each song and who played on what and who did what. So he's been invaluable from that point of view. Now, the other major change for Back to the Egg is that Paul brought Chris Thomas on as co-producer. Now, he hadn't used a co-producer since he used George Martin to help co-produce Live and Let Die, the single from 1973. And I think this is a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction on Paul's part due to the sort of the relatively poor reviews and poor sales of the previous album, London Town, the emergence of punk and new wave and disco. Paul felt that he was becoming less relevant, and that's probably true, and he needed someone like Chris Thomas to make him more relevant and more contemporary. Now, Chris Thomas was a rising star. He produced this album by the Pretenders and this album by the Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bollocks, which is probably one of the most important albums of the mid to late 70s. Very successful album indeed, and there's no surprise that Paul wanted someone like Chris Thomas to work with, and it wasn't a match made in heaven, because essentially punk was sort of anti-Beatles, or that was the rhetoric that they used. And also, by Paul's own admission, he says in later interviews that Chris Thomas wasn't overly impressed with the songs that Paul was bringing to the table for this album. But what we do get from Chris Thomas on this album is a very good sounding album sonically. It's a superb album sonically for sure, and he definitely brings that to the table. Now, let's just have a quick look at the album. This is the original album that I bought in 1979. It's the only copy that I have on vinyl. And so I would therefore definitely welcome a reissue. It is out of print at the moment on vinyl. The inner sleeve looks like this, with the the song credits there and the musician credits there. On the back, it's got this very weird sort of pattern, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with the existing cover art at all, or anything to do with Back to the Egg. So I'm not really sure what it's there or what it means. The vinyl sort of keeps the Egg theme going. Sort of side 1 was labelled as Sunny Side Up, and side 2 as Easy Over. Now, the actual cover art I really like for this album. This was done by Hipgnosis, who did pretty much all of Wings's albums, and it's a great photo, I think, where they seem to be all sort of lying on the floor. They've rolled back the carpet to reveal this hole, which they can look through and see space, which you normally think would be up there, but it's down there. And so I really like that. You can recognise the statue on the mantelpiece from the Wings' Greatest album, which incidentally, if you ever want to see it in real life and you're in London, you can head over to MPL Communications offices in Soho Square. Look up to the 3rd floor and you'll see this in the window. But if you want to take a photo of it, you'll need a camera with a good lens to be able to get a good shot of it. Also really like these sort of Wings logo side lights as well. So great cover, I think, for this album. There was also a CD release. This came out in 1993. Now, this was part of a series, a unique series. Why is it unique? Because it's a series that MPL actually managed to finish, not like the Archive series or the coloured vinyl series, which they haven't managed to finish just yet. But the series that they did in 1993, which was called the Paul McCartney Collection, they did finish. And this was a remastering of every album up to 1993, most of which had bonus tracks on them. Now, 1993, a long time ago, 31 years ago, and this album hasn't been remastered since, so it is definitely due. There are albums that have come out after this that have had remasterings and have had archive collections, so we are definitely due it. The bonus tracks for this, there were 3 of them on the Back to the Egg album. That is Daytime, Nighttime, Suffering, the B-side of Good Night Tonight, which I'll talk about in a minute. Wonderful Christmas Time, and Wonderful Christmas Time's B-side, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reggae, which is about as far from bona fide reggae as you're ever likely to hear. The first songs that were released from the Back to the Egg sessions was the single Good Night Tonight with Daytime, Nighttime, Suffering on the B-side, but these were decided to be left off the album, and that may be one of the the main downfalls of the lack of sales that this got relatively. I mean, it got to number 6. The album got to number 6 in the UK, number 8 in the States. It had good showing in Canada, got to number 2, number 3 in Australia. But for someone that was used to having number 1 albums, number 6 and number 8 is not great. Obviously, most bands around that time would kill for a number 6 or number 8 album. My own particular history with the Back to the Egg album is that it turned up fairly early in my Beatles journey. Discovered them in '76. So the first album that I was actually able to buy as it came out, if you like, was London Town, its predecessor. So Back to the Egg was the second album that I was able to buy as it came out. And obviously Paul took this album out on the road, the UK tour 1979. I managed to see the band on 4 dates on that tour, including the concert for Kampuchea. So it was the first time that I'd seen Paul live. So obviously, I've got a little bit of sentimentality around this album, but I'm not going to let that sentimentality get in the way of a proper review, because that wouldn't be right or correct. So shall we go and have a look and talk about the actual songs? So Back to the Egg was recorded at 4 different locations, 4 studios, which I never think is that conducive to making a consistently sounding album. You never feel comfortable when you're moving from one studio to the other. But 4 studios, the Spirit of Ranachand Studios, which is Paul's studio on his farm in Campbelltown, Limp Castle in Kent, where they took a mobile unit down and recorded there, Replica Studios, which is the replica of Abbey Road No. 2 studio, which Paul had built in the offices of MPL in Soho Square, and of course Abbey Road, where the overdubs were done. Now, the opening track on the album is an instrumental. It only lasts just over a minute. It's Paul playing around with a radio dial, trying to find something to listen to on the radio, something that John Lennon did on Life with the Lions back in 1968. Not that that's relevant, but this sort of playing around with the radio is kind of underpinned by this really, really funky bass line, which I really, really like, and some twin lead guitars from Denny Laine and Lawrence Juba. This track, despite its briefness and its irrelevance, really, has got a really good feel to it, and I really like it. And I like how it ends by finally landing on something that he wants to listen to on the radio, which is the second track on the album, Getting Closer. But for reception, if I'm giving it a mark out of 10, I'm going to give it, a 6 out of 10. Getting Closer, the next track, is really quite... it's a very accessible track. It's a sort of a pop rock track, if you like, full of thrashy guitars and jangling pianos and absolute nonsense lyrics. Paul talks about it actually in his lyrics book. In fact, only 2 songs that he talks about in his lyrics book, and probably the 2 songs that have got the weakest set of lyrics. And I want to take issue with something he says in this book. He says about this, he says the verse, hitting the chisel and making a joint. He says, your audience is going to be amused by those little references because rolling joints is still a bit underground at that time. Well, not really, not in 1979. But if you actually see what the lyric is to that verse, it's hitting the chisel and making a joint, gluing my fingers together. Now that to me says woodwork. That says woodwork. He's not talking about marijuana joints. He's talking about dovetail joints, I think. And that is sort of underpinned by the fact that he's got a picture of a table that he built in his farm at Scotland. He's even got all the bits there on there. So I think he's kind of forgotten what that song was about. But yeah, nonsense lyrics. He gets away with it. He gets away with using the word salamander. But I think it's a good track and, very accessible. It was a single. It was the lead-off single in the US. A double A side with Baby's Request. It got to number 20 in the US, which is not a great showing for a lead-off single from an album. And in the UK, it was the second single from the album, and it only got to number 60, which is really, really poor, but kind of what you expect, because you would expect everyone that, would already have both the A side and the B side if they bought the Back to the Egg album by the time the second single comes out. We'll just have a quick look at the single, because it kind of looks very nice and it sort of follows the egg motif on the label. So that was it. Getting Closer is one of the best tracks on the album, I think. I'm giving that an 8 out of 10. So track 3 is the acoustic ballad, We're Open Tonight. We shouldn't be surprised that track 3 is an acoustic ballad, because Paul does like to put an acoustic ballad as track 3 on his albums. We've seen it before. Bluebird on Band on the Run, Loving Song, Venus and Mars, I'm Carrying on London Town, and Going Into the Future, Somebody Who Cares on Tug of War. It's a very simple song based around a 4-note acoustic guitar pattern. It's pleasant enough. It doesn't really go anywhere for me, but I do quite like the sort of the calming down from Getting Closer to this, and the song that follows it, Spin It On. I think it's placed perfectly on the album. So for me, this is a 7 out of 10. We then get the announcement, this is it. As if, Paul saying, well, here it is. This is it. This is me going punk. And Spin It On is played at breakneck speed. Shuffle beat from Steve Holley, played very, very fast on the drums. And, a finger burning guitar solo from Laurence Juber. But the speed of the song is probably the only sort of nod to punk about this song. It doesn't really shine, it doesn't really sparkle for me, and is fairly forgettable. The good thing about it is it was perfect for the live format, and he did play it on the UK tour. And I don't think the Clash would have been too worried when they heard that Paul has gone punk with Spin It On, but I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. The next track, again and again and again, is Denny Lane's only songwriting contribution to Back to the Egg, and it was a combination of two songs. One song called You Don't Want to Be That Little Woman, which I'm pretty sure if that had been a full song, it would have been an absolutely terrible, terrible song. It was Paul's idea to combine that song with the second song, which is the bit where, summer comes, that part there. So the combination of the two songs, and Paul was right behind this song. He's very enthusiastic in his harmonies and backing vocals on this song. Again, I know this song is it's very accessible, this song, and it's kind of announced with 3 sort of power chords to start with. It is very poppy, it's very catchy, it's very accessible, and I know that a lot of people really like this. But for me, again, it's not of the level of, say, something like Time to Hide or some of the songs that Denny co-wrote on London Town for me. And so, again and again and again, it's an okay track, so I'm going to give it an okay score of 7 out of 10. So track 6, Old Siam Sir, is where this album really picks up for me. Old Siam Sir is probably my favourite song from this album. Very, very guitar laden, and lots of different guitar patterns within this song, which gives it that variation. It's got that riff on the keyboard, written by Linda, which started off life in 1976 as a song called Super Big Heatwave. For those of you that don't know, 1976, we had the hottest summer we have ever had, where it didn't rain between April and September, and there was drought in the UK and all that sort of caper. So it's easy to see where the sort of the origins of that song came from. But it is a fantastic song. But another song that is criticised for having nonsense lyrics, and I suppose it does have nonsense lyrics. But Paul talks about it again in his lyrics book. It's funny that, as I said earlier, the 2 songs from Back to the Egg that are featured in the lyrics book are the 2 songs that received the most criticism for poor lyrics, as if he wants to make a public apology for them. But he says in this book about his songwriting, he says 98% of the time. Now, who says 98% of the time? If you're talking about not quite all the time, you normally say 99%. But Paul, he's not like the rest of us, is he? He says 98% of the time his songs come from a musical idea. So he gets the idea for the music first. Secondly, he thinks about the style in which he's going to sing. Is he going to scream it? Is it going to be a ballad? That sort of thing. And thirdly, he then starts to form the lyrics, and sometimes he has placeholder lyrics, while he's getting the music together. And I kind of agree with that theory, that prioritization, because, lyrics are great. Lyrics are there to charm us and sometimes make us feel emotional, but it's usually the music behind them that give them that charm or that emotional impact. For example, if you had some really sad lyrics and behind it is some thrashy power chords, they're not going to have the same sort of emotional impact is it if the music is some dramatic minor chords like E minor or D minor, the saddest chord of them all. That is what gives them the emotional impact, the combination of the two things. So I kind of agree with that. But I'm really quite attached to the lyrics of Old Siam Sir. I don't think they're rubbish at all. I think, the song is about what we would call these days a Thai bride, a woman that's coming over to the UK to try and find a husband. And but there are verses in here that I just really like, and I really love the verse that says, "In a village in Old East Hampshire." Now, I can assure you that anyone who's not familiar with the delights of East London, there is no village life in East Ham, although there is in Walthamstow, which is also in East London. It's also mentioned in this verse. But this verse goes, "In a village in Old East Hampshire, she met a fellow who made her real, took her rushes to show his mam, sir." Her rushes. Met his dad at the wedding meal. That is fantastic. Met his dad at the wedding meal. I absolutely love that. So Old Siam Sir, I think, is a great track. A chuggy guitar, loads of different guitar, phases throughout this song. Paul is singing it in that sort of "Oh Darling Monkbury Moon Delight," the hoarse voice, the shouty voice. Love the song. He's putting everything into it. It's really good. Just have a look at the single. This was the lead-off single in the UK. Wasn't released as a single in the US. That is what it looks like. Carries the egg motif on the label. "Spin It On" was the B-side. Got to number 35 in the UK charts. Very disappointing showing for a lead-off single, but it was only released a week before the album, so I expect a lot of people were waiting for the album to come out before lamping out on the single. That's possible, but very disappointing show. But I love it. I'm giving Old Siam Sir 9 out of 10. So side one ends with the fantastic "Arrow Through Me," very sort of soulful track, funky as you like, and this is the synth pop track. So if this had ended up on the following album, McCartney 2, it wouldn't have been too surprised at all. It would have fitted perfectly on that album, but I'm glad that it is on this album because it certainly improves Back to the Egg for its presence. It's keyboards and drums that Steve, Holly and Paul McCartney are the only members of Wings that play on it. Linda, Denny and Lawrence probably had the day off, although they played this one live, and I don't remember those three leaving the stage during this song. I can't really remember. So they must have found parts for them to play, which is another reason why we need this we need an archive edition of Back to the Egg, because we need to hear the live version from the UK tour in perfect sound. That is what we need. Okay, so it was the second single in the US. This is a Japanese copy of it that was included in the singles box. Again, a disappointing showing for the single. Got to number 29 in the States, which actually is probably not a bad probably not a bad position for a second single when the album's already been out a couple of months. The Paul's usual horn section play on this song. Howard Casey, Thaddeus Richards, Steve Howard and Tony Dorsey, they play the horn coda at the end, which really sort of lifts the song, and you can hear Paul scat singing underneath. I think Arrow Through Me is a great track, and I'm giving that 9 out of 10 as well. So side two opens up with Rockestra theme. Now, I think everyone knows what the Rockestra was and who it was, but if you don't, Rockestra was a band of rock musicians forming an orchestra, as the name suggests. And just have a listen to the lineup for this song. On guitar, Denny Laine, Lawrence Juba, Dave Gilmour from Pink Floyd, Hank Marvin from The Shadows, Pete Townsend from The Who. On drums, Steve Holley, John Bonham from Led Zeppelin, Kenny Jones from The Faces, shortly to be with The Who. On bass, Paul McCartney, John Paul Jones again, Ronnie Lane from The Faces, Bruce Thomas from The Attractions, Elvis Costello's band. On piano, Paul, Gary Brooker, John Paul Jones again. On keyboards, Linda McCartney, Tony Ashton, and a variety of percussionists, including Ray Cooper, and of course the horn section as well. Now, when you've got a lineup like that, and you're putting together a very, very simple, straightforward instrumental song. It's a bit like driving your brand new Ferrari to the corner shop to go and pick up a pint of milk. You feel like it's kind of a wasted opportunity. It is mostly an instrumental and a very simple one. It's got that line, "Why haven't I had any dinner?" Probably for obvious reasons, and it's got that great ending from Paul. That no, that bit, I like it. But you know, it might have been a waste, but it still picked up the Grammy in 1980 for the best new instrumental track. So justification for Rockestra Theme. I'm giving it 7 out of 10. Now the next track, To You, was a track that I never really liked, but I do now. It's a sort of a very loose feel to it, rock pop song. It's got some weird lyrics about, keep it out of my shoes, stepping on toes, keep it out of my nose, and all that sort of stuff. But it's a song that I've kind of got to like in later life. I've mellowed to it. The slide guitar in it is great, and that's played by Paul. It's brief and to the point, and I like that song. I'm giving it 7 out of 10 for To You. So for the next two songs, Paul does what Paul always does when he's got some fragments of songs, some unfinished songs that he wants to use. He sticks them together in a medley as if they are always supposed to be like that. The first of these, After the Ball / Million Miles. Now, After the Ball recorded in the castle in a big sort of open space, and there is a lot of reverb on Paul's voice, which incidentally sounds superb on this song. It's this raspy voice that he's using on this, and I say lots of reverb, but it's probably natural reverb from the environment where it's being recorded rather than something that comes from the desk. He's playing root notes during the verses on the bass, and the song kind of starts off very minimalistic and builds to the point where we get to about 2 minutes where all the band are in and it's all going very nicely indeed. Lawrence Juba comes in with a cracking guitar solo, very short solo, but it's short and to the point and just what's needed, and that's where the segue into Million Miles happens, or doesn't really happen. It's not really a proper segue. One song stops and the other one begins, and Million Miles is a kind of a gospel song. It doesn't really fit I don't think, with After the Ball. It's just Paul on vocals, and he's also playing a squeeze box, an accordion, and I don't think it really adds anything to the song. By the time we get to the end of After the Ball, the song has already been going 2.5 minutes, and there's other songs on this album that are a shorter length of time than that. So, maybe After the Ball could have stood on its own, but I'm going to give the song 7.5 out of 10. It's mainly for After the Ball, which is a track that I really like. Then the second medley follows straight after. That is Winter Rose / Love Awake. And, I think that with Winter Rose, it's a real shame, because I think that Winter Rose has got the potential to have become a classic McCartney ballad. It could have all the elements. It's a very pretty song, piano-based song. Paul plays a harpsichord in parts of this. 3 different sounds on the harpsichord which sound very nice on the song. There's great backing vocals from Linda. It's got all the classic McCartney Wings ballad. If it had just been developed, given time to develop a little bit more, I think it could have been a classic McCartney song. Love Awake, it does fit with the song, because both the songs sort of talk about love and talk about the changing seasons and love in that sort of way of how it develops in like the seasons develop. And Love Awake is an acoustic ballad, very, very nice song. This is slightly more developed than Winter Rose, I think, and the 2 songs together clock in at about 5 minutes, so it's probably about right. But I would have liked to have seen Winter Rose develop a little bit more and see what could have been done with that song. As I say, it could have been classic McCartney, a classic McCartney ballad had it been given time to develop and sparkle. The next track, The Broadcast. You have to ask, what the hell is this doing on this album? So The Broadcast is just Paul playing a little piano part, and the bloke who owns the castle is reading some tired old prose over the top of it. Complete and utterly pointless. I don't know why it's here. I'm giving it 1 out of 10, and I'm being generous. So the penultimate song, So Glad to See You Here, is the second Rockestra song, and this is a much better song than the Rockestra theme. It rocks like an absolute bastard. It's full of heavy guitars and heavy drums, just exactly what you want from a rock song. And it really does shine, and it is one of the best tracks on the album. It's interesting to some stories about the Rockestra that I might want to include here, is that there were other people that were invited to be part of the Rockestra. Elton John was invited, but he was booked to do something else. Jeff Beck was asked as well, but he wanted the right of veto if he didn't like the songs when he got to the studio. He had the right to veto them and not play on them, so he was told to not bother. Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page were both asked as well, but just didn't bother to turn up. And there was also they had to stop the session for an hour because Hank Marvin was teaching a Bible class, so he had to go off and teach his Bible class and then come back so they could finish the song. But So Glad to See You Here, great song. I'm giving that 9 out of 10, one of the best on the album. The final song, Baby's Request, was a kind of a last minute inclusion. So this was a song that was written for the Mills Brothers. They asked Paul to write him a song, a 1940s jazz song. He went away and did it, came back with Baby's Request. They didn't like it, they didn't want to record it, so it went on the album. And Steve Holley mentions that the atmosphere of recording this was much more relaxed than the rest of the album because they thought they were just recording a demo. It's a very nice song, and a song that Paul revisited on Kisses on the Bottom in 2012, but this version is much better. I really like the sort of the rumbling stand-up, upright bass that Paul is playing sort of throughout this song. Sounds really good. The solo that comes in about 1 minute 20, which sounds like a trumpet or a cornet or something like that, is actually played by Paul on a Moog synthesizer. It's a really good song. It replaced a song called Cage, which was originally going to be on the album. The song was called Cage because the chord sequence was C-A-G-E. That was consigned to the archives, yet to be released officially, archive collection. But that is it. I'm going to give Baby's Request 8 out of 10, and that is your Back to the Egg album. Okay, so the album overall scored 101.5 points, which there are 14 songs on the album. So the average score for the album is 7.25. Well, what does that mean? 7 is kind of an average, an average score, and that is probably where this album is. It means that there are songs on here of merit, but there are no 10 out of 10 songs for me on this album. There are a few 9s and there are a few 8s, which is good, but too many 7s, and obviously the Broadcast really brings the ranking of this album down. They recorded a lot of songs during these sessions that were left off the album, so there was no need for that to be there, or Million Miles or something like that. But that's how it is. Now, I'm aware that I've never done a full Paul McCartney album ranking as yet, and it's something that's on my radar, something to do, but it is such a mammoth task. But if we think about it in terms of Wings albums, at the moment, how I feel about this at the moment, having done a deep dive into Back to the Egg, I'm thinking that maybe Wildlife is probably the only Wings album that I think is weaker than Back to the Egg. It was sort of, the final nail in the Wings coffin. They did go back to the studio after this album was recorded to try and make some more music. It didn't happen. And before you knew it, McCartney 2 was on the shelves and Paul was a solo artist. And that's how it's been ever since. Now, that is my feeling, and I know lots of people are going to disagree about it, but please tell me about it down in the comments. Where do you rank Back to the Egg amongst the Wings albums and all McCartney albums in general? Now, little bit of housekeeping. Please, if you like this video, please just take 1 second of your life just to give this video a like, and because it really does help the channel, helps my video get out there. You did brilliantly on the last video, got lots of likes, so thank you very much for that indeed. If you've just stumbled across this channel by accident and you fancy getting involved, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing. We'd love to have you on board. That would be absolutely marvellous. And you do get Beatley Tones promise that you won't get any adverts mid-roll in any of my videos. I don't allow YouTube to put adverts in the middle of my videos, so you just get them at the beginning and at the end, which means that you can watch my videos without any interruptions of silly adverts. So no adverts mid-roll on this channel. Right, that is it from me. Thanks very much for watching. What am I up to this week? Well, tomorrow, Friday, I'm going to the Tate Gallery in London to see Yoko Ono's art exhibition. So this coming Sunday, the 18th of February, going to do a live stream at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. We're going to do a live stream. Hope you can join me for that. We can talk about anything you like. We can talk about this ranking of, we can talk about Back to the Egg, we can talk about Band on the Run, the underdub mixes, anything you like. Nothing is off the table as usual, so please come and join me for that. That would be great to see you on Sunday. Okay, that is it from me. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye bye.